Are we good? Okay. All right. It's good. All right. Hi. So yeah, I just got done watching Legend of the Galactic Heroes last night, and I got finished it late last night, so I wasn't really up to making a video about it. But I figured I should just make one now. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really freaking enjoyed it. I'm trying to think where I should start. Maybe I guess when I first heard about it, right? So when I first heard about it, this was back when I joined the YouTube. This is back when I joined YouTube, like in, I don't know, maybe 2012, 2013, something like that. But it was very early on, right? And back then, there were a couple people that are, some of them are still on here today, like Zoro Fanboy 124, King of Lightning, Joe 10. Some of these names might be recognizable to some of you guys who are watching, but one of those people that used to make videos back then was Uber Hikari. And the first time I ever heard about Legend of Galactic Heroes, so I'm not going to try and spoil anyone. I'm going to do my best not to spoil anyone here. And if I am going to spoil, I'll try to do my best to let you guys know before I actually do the spoiling. But the first time I ever heard about Legend of Galactic Heroes was when Uber Hikari talked about it. And so I'm not going to spoil. We were talking about character deaths, and he said that a particular character in Legend of Galactic Heroes, when he dies, is like one of the most emotional deaths for him, and he was not a person that usually gets very emotional, So he was saying, like, man, that death was just exceptional and legendary. So that was the first time I ever heard about it. And then I remember I went ahead, because I didn't think that I was going to go ahead and watch it, but I went ahead and I watched the character's death that he was talking about on YouTube. And I think at the time I was just like, oh yeah, this is good, but I wasn't like too overly impressed. And as the years go on, I rewatched that scene over the years, maybe after 4 or 5 years, and I'm like, oh wow, this is better than I remember. And now in 2020, now obviously the quarantine is here, and it's a great time to get things off your backlog. So I just figured, what the hell, I'll go ahead and watch Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and I truly don't regret doing that at all. I love this series, man. It's really freaking good, and yeah, it's crazy, right? It's just like you put something, you hear about it, you put it in your backlog for a little bit, and then you finally go ahead and you check it out and you watch it. And yeah, I freaking love this series. This is now in my top 10 favorite anime ever. It's probably the smartest, at the very least, the smartest anime, or the most intelligently written anime that I've ever watched. Just because there's such a huge discourse, and there's dialogue between the characters is about the nature of government, and you really get to learn a lot about like politics and government in the show. And so I learned a lot from it. And sorry, I thought someone was coming down. I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, it's definitely like the most intelligently written anime that I've watched. Maybe the most intelligently written show, period. Because I'm just trying to think. I mean, Sopranos is really intelligently written. Mad Men so far is pretty intelligently written. I'm not going to go ahead and compare. But just at least for an anime, this is probably the most smartly written anime that I've ever watched. And yeah, it was just a blast. Where do I even begin? Like, I guess I can start with the characters. Like so when people talk about like just casts, overall cast, like what is the best cast in an anime, or the best cast in a show, or top 5, whatever, like this needs to be, I mean, it already is in the discussion by other people, but now if I were to contribute something to that question, like it would be this cast. Like there is just so many great characters, like over and over again, and what's interesting to me is that generally when you watch a show, you have a good idea of like who a protagonist or the protagonist excuse me, hold on. Okay, there we go. Generally, when you watch or you read something, you tend to have like a good sense of like who the main characters are, and this show you kind of have that, but the idea of who exactly the main character is like not as clear as other shows. And I thought that was something that was really interesting, because you can make a case that Reinhard, Yang, and Yulian, like all three of those have strong cases for being the main character of the show, you know. And it was interesting to me that like you had like probably like the three protagonists that are like the three most likely or the three most qualified, quote unquote, to be the main protagonist. But it's interesting that like it was never like posited like in that way. The storytelling of this anime was more so like these are just groups of people, and there's no necessarily like a hero or a villain. These are just two sides fighting against one another. So I greatly appreciated that side. But I mean, there's just so many great characters, man. Like my favorite character, which I probably knew early on, even before I watched the show, was going to be Yang, and it is Yang. Yang is just such a great character, man. Like I just love his laziness. I love his smart dialogue on democracy. Just overall, just a really great character. And I don't know if he's in my top 10 favorite characters in anime, but he's for sure in my probably in my top 15 or top 20. Like if I made a list of my 20 favorite characters in an anime, or a list of my 15 favorite characters in anime, Yang is probably on that list. I don't know about my top 10 though. Top 10, it's like those have always pretty much been set in stone, but Yang for sure is a character that not only is he my favorite, but there are characters that sometimes you just resonate like emotionally, like in your heart, and like Yang for me is definitely one of those characters. So Yang is my favorite character in the series, Yang Wenli, and then after him it was hard to choose like who my second, third, fourth are. So I don't really have a second and third or fourth, but I can say that my favorite characters in no particular order after Yang are Walter. Shenkov is just like this battle-loving character, and he's an atypical parent. I love it. Royenthal was just amazing. He's voiced by Noria Wakamoto. His past, he himself too loves to fight and to wage war. I love that about him. And he has like great philosophy on the seizing of power, like how one should take power or inherit power, and like what that means. And then besides Walter and Royenthal, Dusty Attenborough, which I think, talking to other people who have like watched Legend of the Galactic Heroes, like I'm the only one that really likes him that much, you know, like that. So I guess I'm a little unique as a fan because Dusty Attenborough is like one of my favorite characters. But those are basically my four favorite characters. Of course, I like Reinhard. Reinhard I love too. The only reason I don't like Reinhard as much as those other four is just because like there's nothing wrong with him like in terms of like the writing or the character. I just kind of felt that his attachment to his sister kind of made him a little too much of like a baby a little bit. Like he was like anyway like over and over again, you know. And it's just kind of, especially early on. After that, not so much. But yeah, I mean, I love Reinhardt too, so don't get it twisted. I love Yulian. As far as like obscure characters that I liked, Fahrenheit, who is one of the admirals in on the Galactic Empire side, for the Lowengram dynasty. He's an obscure, or not an obscure character, but like one of the less talked about characters that I liked. I liked Silver Birch, voiced by Koichi Yamadera. I thought he was good, even though he didn't show up a lot. I like Goldenbaum, honestly. Like this year, this last couple of years, I've really started to take myself to like very like fucked up characters, or you know, because it's kind of funny to me a little bit. It's like how they're so brash, like with what they do. Like this dude was like, when he literally called himself like the holy god king of all of humanity, and then euthanized the poor and the mentally ill, shut down social reform programs. Like what this dude did was like completely evil, ruthless, and harsh. But it was just, I kind of like liked that a little bit. I don't know. It was just kind of, it's like he's such a dickhead that it was making me laugh, you know. So. He's another character. I liked Oberstein. I know a lot of fans don't like Oberstein, but I liked Oberstein. He wasn't my favorite, but I still liked him. I'm trying to think who else. Rubinsky. Rubinsky is another character that I liked. So there's like a lot of characters like in this cast which are like extremely like really well written, and they're not necessarily like quote unquote like the deepest characters or anything like that, but their personalities, their dialogue, the charisma of the characters, I think is just like pretty much perfect. And so when you take the combination of those things, I really think that you have like one of the best casts, at least for me, that I've ever seen at the very least in an anime, but I'm gonna say like in a game that I've played and shows and movies that I've watched, like this is one of the best casts like I've ever seen. And the story was exceptional too. I thought that there were two plot twists I think that really stuck out to me. One was with the certain character's father, so I'm not gonna spoil, but one was with the certain character's father posing a rebellion. I thought that was I thought like I didn't expect him at all to be the rebeller. And the second one was the promptness and the quickness of a character's death. That was completely unexpected too. And there's a lot of characters that, you know, towards the last like 20 episodes of the anime, like a lot of character deaths like happen unexpectedly and shockingly, and I think it's great. But really, it's like I really like the story because it's basically like, and not, again, not to spoil, I'm just giving the general idea. You have like three factions vying for control of the universe. So you have the Free Planets Alliance, you have the Galactic Empire, which later turns into the Lowengram Dynasty, and then you have Fezan. And these three are really fighting with each other for, well, it's really the Free Planets Alliance and the Empire fighting against one another, and then Fezan is kind of like controlling things behind the scenes, but then people are aware of Fezan's presence, so they're the knowledge and the acknowledgement of them as a force kind of makes it like a three-way battle rather than a two-way. But I thought that was really interesting, like how you see it. And I'm not going to say like what happens, but when you see about how the government of the government of a democracy is pitted against the democracy of a king, of a theocracy, and you see the cons and the pros of each, it really just like opens your mind, and you learn a lot from it. And I really like that. Like one of the things that it really got to me in the show was like you hear the word dictatorship, right? Or you hear the word dictator and you automatically assume like, okay, this is like dictators are evil, right? And like this is not a good thing to be a dictator. And then when you watch the show, you actually realize that dictatorship is simply like, just with no biases put together, it's simply just another form of government. And that when you look at history, dictatorships like Mussolini or Stalin or Hitler or Mao Zedong, I think he counts as, I think he was communist, but I'm not sure. But when you look at people who are associated with the word dictatorship, those were all seen as terrible people. And a dictator at the end of the day is just someone that, quote unquote, does that, just dictates, right? And people always assume this to be an evil person, but it's interesting that Yang was saying, like when he explains dictatorship, he was saying like dictatorships can work as long as the person is good. And that's where like Reinhardt comes in. Like Reinhardt is one of arguably the main character of the anime, and he ends up being a dictator, and he's a good dictator. So I really appreciated that aspect of the story. And really just like the progression of the story, like quote unquote who wins, and like how everything turns out, I thought was incredible. And all the betrayal in the series too, I thought was, the plot twists and all the conspiracies and stuff, I thought was really good. I really liked it. And that in itself lends to the world and the atmosphere of the series. So if you look at like the art and the animation and the atmosphere of the series, it's very like vintage, like 80s. So I think this was made in 88. But it's like it seems very like a 80s 90s anime. Like it has those quiet moments and that vintage look to it. And the music itself is very like classical in nature. So that really just builds up like the world of the series. And one of the best episodes to me was episode 40, when it explains like the backstory of the world, basically like the beginnings and the reign of the Goldenbaum dynasty, and like how it really touches on like on human nature and the history of humans. And that's another big theme actually of the anime, like history, like how governments and how history, like what history is, like what it is, what can you take away from history, the purpose of history. And I think that was another thing that really just opened my third eye, so to speak. And I can't really say enough about like the characters and the story, because it really like it was really something that was just like so intelligently written. Like that's one of my biggest takeaways from the anime. And the voice acting in itself. The voice acting in itself was you can recognize a lot of similar, like, especially like if you watch like older anime like I did, like Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Fist of the North Star, etc. Like you can, or Yu Yu Hakusho, whatever. You can notice that some voice actors from those, they were also in this anime, and so. Like obviously one of the big ones is Reinhard with Vegeta, Ryo Horikawa, right? Like they're the same voice actor. Yusuke Nozomu Sasaki, he voices Yulian, Toshio Furukawa, who is Piccolo and Ace in One Piece, voices Poplan, who is one of my favorite characters also in this series. So and Frieza, Ryusuke Nakao, he voices Mashengo. So there's a lot of like overlay and overlap when it comes to that, and whenever I watch like an older anime, I just like to point that stuff out. But I just love this anime. I really, if you want to watch it, you can watch it. It's interesting because it was just like such a niche anime, and now it's like rated number 5 overall in my anime list, and now a lot of people like it, and now there's like a remake of it, which I'm not watching, by the way. I've watched like a couple of scenes like on YouTube, but it just kind of like, it doesn't capture the atmosphere and the mood of the series, I feel, as well as the old series. So I haven't really watched it, but yeah, I mean, for me, this is really great because I kind of like dropped anime, quote unquote, dropped anime like 2 years ago, and now with the quarantine, I'm starting to get back into it a little bit. So this was really great for me. But yeah, this is one of my 10 favorite anime. One of my 10 favorite anime ever. Yang is one of my favorite anime characters, at least one of my favorite anime characters ever, and yeah, this is just a great show, and man, it's just like I learned a lot from it, so I value it for that. And the other interesting thing that I learned about this series was that this anime is adapted from a series of novels, right? And these novels were written by a guy named Yoshiki Tanaka, and Tanaka is actually the author of the heroic legend of Arslan novels, that story. And if you guys recognize that title, it's because the mangaka for FMA, Hiromu Arakawa, she is creating a manga based on those currently, or I think it might be over, I'm not sure, but so that might be where you recognize it from. And then that same series has also been adapted into an OVA or something, some anime like back in the 90s. So it was interesting to me because you can tell like how much he loves like government and like kingdoms and empires and autocracies and like all these different sort of like government and politics sort of things. So it's crazy, right? And he was born in One Piece's Eiichiro Oda's hometown of Kumamoto, Japan. And that was another thing. I kind of noticed like a sort of similarity, not like a huge similarity with One Piece, but Legend of the Galactic Heroes deals with like the history and ages of humanity, of mankind, and that's something that's a key theme, or a key plot mover in One Piece as well, like an age of pirates, or like the different ages and histories of One Piece, and so that was something that really came to mind. But then another thing that I realized was, and this is just like a very small thing, if you guys are caught up to One Piece right now, that Kaido, one of his titles is Governor General, and I saw that same phrase being used for Silver Birch. I think it's for Silver Birch or for Royenthal, in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and I was just, like, it was just something like I'd never heard that term before, and I was just thinking, so maybe Oda himself is a fan of Legend of the Galactic Heroes because you see, him and Tanaka are born in the same hometown. You see the similar themes of like history and eras on both works, and then it's not a very big similarity, but they use that term Governor General, so it just got me thinking maybe they've met, or Oda was a fan of it and something. But yeah, anyway, this is just an awesome show, man, and I really enjoyed my time with it. And the endings and the openings, dude, just like they're so great at like setting the mood for the episode. And yeah, but yeah, this is one of my 10 favorite anime ever now, dude. There's no debate. Like, one of the best anime I've ever seen for sure. And yeah, dude, it's just fucking fantastic. And yeah, I just really enjoyed my time with it. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching. And yeah, great show.